Sukuna Ryomen is one of the most popular villains to have come out of Shonen Jump in recent times. Almost every time this man was on the screen, he ran a generational fade and looked damn good at doing it. But there is a lot of conversation to be had about Sukuna's character development and his character and the nuances overall, so let's look into it.
Sometimes you gotta close the door to open a window.
When we're first introduced to Sukuna in the first chapter, his first action is to completely and utterly obliterate a cursed spirit and proceed to laugh hysterically while looking for where the women and children are and screaming about how the new age will be marvellous and it's going to be a slaughter. Mildly questionable, but right out the gate his character his actions and words have only demonstrated one thing: sheer, pure contempt for life. Violence. This is only further demonstrated and proven the more we get into the story, and Sukuna spends most of his time taunting Yuji and trying to make his life an absolute utter misery, and the only thing Sukuna cares for at this point in time is fighting and killing, even stating at one point that the hierarchy, not based purely on strength, is boring. Sukuna only cares for the strong, and the weak should just pack it up and die. And there's multiple key moments throughout the story that serve to hammer this point home. Many smaller points, but also many points that stand out much more than others. But somewhere along the line in the story, Sukuna's perspective slowly but surely changed. Because for the first 100 chapters of the story, Sukuna serves only one purpose: make Yuji's life as difficult as possible. Sukuna either directly or indirectly causes some of the most traumatic things to happen within Yuji's character growth: the detention center, the school with Mahito, and the most pivotal point for Yuji and Sukuna so far, Shibuya.
Gojo, seizei kamishimero.
Up until this point, Sukuna has shown zero interest in anything other than fighting and making Yuji's life a misery, but it's this interaction with Jogo where we finally get a better understanding perspective for Sukuna and who he is and what he values, and even, for the first time in the series, empathy from Sukuna. Everything we have seen from Sukuna so far has been negative emotion formed by a distaste of the weak, but for the first time in Shibuya, we see a version of Sukuna who is familiar but also different. For the first time, Sukuna finds an opponent who, in the series, who is strong and can allow him to have some fun. And it's this conversation between Sukuna and Jogo that starts to give us an insight into his mind and how it ticks and how it works. And this conversation, it came to us as a result of Sukuna finding value in someone, Jogo, who basically allowed him to have fun. And in turn, Sukuna talked with him in a way that I can only describe as respectful, giving Jogo what would become one of the most iconic lines of the series so far: "Stand proud, you are strong." A line that made Jogo cry. The same Jogo whose character literally burnt a restaurant to a crisp just because he could. Being declared strong by Sukuna was pivotal in us starting to get a grasp on Sukuna's character. However, it doesn't last very long, because this moment of empathy and respect fades almost instantly as Sukuna moves into his next task of felling Maharaga, and yeah.
You can see it, Maharaga! You can see my curse technique!
Here is where we are shown Sukuna in a light that is a lot more familiar to us. After wiping out Shibuya, Sukuna goes back to the cruel being that we are familiar with. His disdain for Yuji and weakness rears its head again, switching back to show Yuji the damage that Sukuna caused in Shibuya. Sukuna knew this would break Yuji. However, this moment is pivotal for Yuji as well as Sukuna. Sukuna momentarily succeeds in breaking Yuji, but in doing so, he drove Yuji into the further mindset of Yuji's cog-like mentality, where Yuji chose to accept the reality of the situation. He chose to keep moving forward regardless. Now, Shibuya is the nexus point for Yuji and Sukuna. Their stories are interlinked and intertwined. For Yuji, Shibuya served as the harsh and stark reminder that curses are just that. They are curses. They exist purely to make him and others suffer. And for Sukuna, Shibuya served as a moment in time where he witnessed Yuji go through the worst emotions and events of his life so far within the story, only to watch Yuji get back up and fight again. A moment that, while very subtle, showcased a very, very different type of strength to Sukuna: persistence and perseverance, as opposed to Sukuna's overwhelming raw power and physical strength. Even if Yuji wasn't strong in a Jujutsu sense, his mentality could never have seemed to stay broken in a way that Sukuna wanted it to, and I believe that this moment stays with Sukuna. My own headcanon here is that while he would never outright admit it, I think that this moment right here is where Sukuna saw a glimpse of something that he could never be inside of Yuji. From here on out, Yuji's cog mentality is what Sukuna witnesses for a good chunk of the series up until about the Culling Games and Shinjuku arc. Now at the start of the Culling Games, Yuji and Sukuna stand in a position in the story where at any moment, the story could change rapidly, forever. If Yuji succeeds in freeing Gojo, they win. But if Sukuna takes Megumi's body before then, he can win. Or at least that's what they both thought. You see, right here in chapter 212 and 213 onwards, this is where we get the brunt of Sukuna's development as a character through very subtle subtext and indirect callbacks to previous events that happen within the series. Now, one thing that Gege does in Jujutsu Kaisen is he doesn't hold your hand. He doesn't say, come, let's go take down a memory lane. No, he gives you the answers to the questions, and if you want those answers, you have to go looking for them. And for some readers, this is very off-putting, and I understand it, but for others like myself, I really enjoy it. It presents an opportunity to reread the series as many times and find more and more details that you missed the first time around. It gives you a really good sense of rereadability. In 212 and 213, we see Sukuna's actions lead him into taking over Megumi's body and proceeding to punch Yuji into the afterlife. Side note, this punch might be better than anything any Black Flash has delivered to us on this series personally. There's been a lot of cool punches, but this one here, for some reason, even though it wasn't a Black Flash, just hit so damn hard. Anyway, Yuji continues his persistence against Sukuna, and it leads to a very interesting conversation after a small fight between them, with Yuji asking why they just can't live without causing any suffering. But it's here Sukuna replies to him, "To me, the real question is, why are you all so weak? Why do such weaklings cling so fiercely to life? How can a creature that falls apart at a touch say that it always wants to be happy? The helpless have no choice but to swallow the suffering life gives them." And it's this little speech right here from Sukuna echoes the words of his first moments in chapter 1, and it also echoes his words against Gojo. A hierarchy not based off strength is boring. Now, Sukuna truly values strength, but the strength he values is the kind of strength that can only be used for combat, rather than strength that is internal, strength that can only come from living as a human. The struggles that we all go through, grief, sadness, trauma, they all lead into strength, character development eventually. After all, there is no strength that has not crossed the path of weakness. But Sukuna doesn't value that type of strength. One of the core themes of Sukuna's characters is his strength. He's depicted as this overwhelming force of nature, a man or a mutant, a monster, whatever you want to describe him as, whose only desire is to fight the strong until he dies. But it's also made pretty clear early on in the story that both him and Gojo stand alone, completely alone in their strength. They are both depicted as people no one can match in terms of their strength, which is where Gege introduces us to Yorozu, and the plot line that is strength and the loneliness it brings. Now, I mentioned this before, how Sukuna didn't have any regard for the type of strength that Yuji wielded. To Sukuna it seems futile, but yet in all of his power, Sukuna couldn't do anything about it, no matter how hard he tried. Now, this is because of Sukuna's strength isolating him from everyone else, strength and the loneliness that it brings. Yorozu, Gojo, Kashimo, Higuruma, Yuta, and finally Yuji, I believe these are the people who are all super influential in affecting Sukuna's mindset throughout the series. All of these people, if you go and reread the series, all of these people all have influential and really impactful moments with Sukuna. In this fight with Yorozu, it's hinted that Sukuna already knows and has experienced the emotion of love, probably not like you or me, but it's alluded to that he has at the very least. And in his fight with Gojo, we see Sukuna with perhaps the most genuinely happy smile we've ever seen from him in the series so far. An emotion of pure happiness after fighting someone of Gojo's level. A fight that proved he wasn't entirely lonely in his strength. Even if Gojo couldn't make him go all out, Sukuna still enjoyed the fight regardless. For the second time in the series, Sukuna expresses actual respect, and for the second time in the series, Sukuna expresses actual respect and what seems to be a mutual admiration for his opponent, telling him "You did well, Gojo Satoru. I shall never forget you for as long as I live." A line that once again hammers home his mentality, a sorcerer who values strength above all else. Now, during his fight with Kashimo, a conversation is had about whether Sukuna was born strong or if he earned that title, and Sukuna replies with, "Who knows? I was born a cursed, unwanted little wretch. That much I can say." And I believe this in and of itself is indeed his answer. Sukuna was born unwanted, and thus in turn was born into solitude due to his strength. I mean, especially given the fact that Sukuna ate his own brother in the womb, this dude was probably born an absolute monster already and immediately isolated. However, Kashimo echoes the words Sukuna said to Yuji in chapter 214. How can you connect with others? How can you love those beneath you while knowing nothing of weakness? Kashimo mentions how he never understood. He was always surrounded by those feeble as the dirt beneath his feet. Now, again, leaning into the solitude by strength plotline that JJK has been telling us subtly throughout the series. A conversation between Sukuna and Kashimo happens in which Sukuna solidifies his beliefs once more. The thought of needing someone else to fulfill him never even crossed his mind, and if he wanted to eat, he would eat, and if he saw an eyesore, he would kill it, and if it entertains me, he would throw it a bone. However, it's this line, "If I see an eyesore, I kill it," that I want to sort of focus on here. You see, throughout the entire story, Yuji possessed a threat to Sukuna's existence, but also his mentality. The more time Sukuna spent inside of Yuji, the more he came closer to his death. If he sat back and let Yuji collect the fingers, he'd have eventually died alongside Yuji, but also at the same time, Sukuna hasn't been able to kill Yuji. Even when given the opportunity to leave Yuji to die, he never actually did. Yuji just stands as the complete and utter opposite in every sense of the word to Sukuna's mentality and his ideals. Now, once Sukuna fought Kashimo and Kashimo had asked him these questions, Yuji and Higuruma joined the battlefield, and it's his fight with Higuruma that leaves Sukuna in the most perplexed state that we've ever seen him in the series. Higuruma's skill and potential enthralls Sukuna. Sukuna sees a strength within Higuruma, a talent that rivals Gojo Satoru, and as we know, Gojo is someone who Sukuna will never forget. While being fascinated with Higuruma, Yuji tries to sort of interject, with Sukuna basically dismissing him and calling him a bore, but again, at this point in time, Sukuna could have killed Yuji, but simply wasn't able to. However, after Higuruma's defeat, it's where we get the cracks in Sukuna's mentality starting to show. There's a few pages and a few lines of dialogue that really emphasize the change in Sukuna that is coming throughout the series and as they happen in chapter 248. Now, this may be new to you, this theory here, but oftentimes in the series of Jujutsu Kaisen, an all-black box like this is often representative of a curse. Not all the time, but some of the times. Either from one person to another, or a curse placed on someone's self. A curse within this series isn't quite something that's defining, it's more something that the heroes or the person it's endowed upon need to conquer, and I believe this specific sequence with Sukuna is him battling his own curse. I mentioned this way back when this first chapter dropped. It felt like he was combating someone, it felt like there was two sides to Sukuna battling for supremacy here, and it's something that we see him battling with, mentioning all the people to him are just a way to pass time until his death, until he arrives at the conclusion as to why he's so annoyed. Ideals that go beyond oneself, something Gojo was the epitome of in this series, and it's something I'd like to dive into later on in a different video, but Sukuna and Gojo were essentially two sides to the coin, but Sukuna questions that perhaps it's not the times that have changed, but rather it's himself that's actually changed. The men who he faced all those years ago stood for the same thing that Jujutsu High does right now, and they stand to kill Sukuna. But Yuji is different. You see, Sukuna starts to understand that for the first time that his strength can't beat Yuji. He can't. No matter how many times he breaks him, he'll get right back up. He possesses an indomitable ideal. And it's this that I believe is the turning point for Sukuna right here. Even though he knows Yuji can't be broken in his ideals, Sukuna decides that he will mince Yuji's ideals to bits. He'll shred them to bits. And this is the point in the story here for the first time that Sukuna is almost trying to prove his own ideals against someone else. He's basically trying to prove his strength and his ideals against Yuji's purely because he finds it unpleasant that Yuji, someone far, far below him, can rival him with nothing but strength of will and maintained ideals. This, I firmly believe, is the turning point in Sukuna's change of character. From this point on, in comparison to the end of the series, remember, Sukuna only values strength, and he only values power and a fight, basically. But now he's experiencing a different type of strength, A strength that is not only grown right before his very eyes, and has been since the start of the series by way of Jujutsu, but also a strength that is being bolstered by his allies and his friends. It's this strength that is shown by Yuji that changes Sukuna over the course of the series. The consistent mindset and growth in Yuji's character that proves to Sukuna not all strength is made equal. And I believed that by the end of the series, this is why Sukuna's mindset sort of changes so suddenly. It's an accumulation of all these things that I've listed, and it helps Sukuna realize that his strength that he boasted wasn't as ironclad as he once thought, and those much weaker than him are very, very capable of toppling him for good, which ultimately comes full circle to what Sukuna said way back at the beginning of the series. Hierarchy not based purely on strength is boring. Now, if Yuji's strength beats Sukuna's strength, that would make Sukuna lower in the hierarchy, which now gives him a new purpose in life, a new bone to throw to someone, a new thing to play with. Anyways, that's everything from me. I truly hope you enjoyed this video. I got lots more just like it ready to go, but also, while you're here, please be sure to check out some of my other content. I have been covering Kagurabachi, and also I'll be covering Hunter x Hunter in the near future, and as always, much fucking love, big fucking kisses, peace.